Hi, everybody. Thank you so very much for joining us today for this very special, wonderful panel. Today, we're going to be celebrating some amazing women that are in technical theater. But before we get into all of that good stuff, I just want to give you a few items of housekeeping. First of all, this session is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. It might take us about a week or two to get it edited, but once it is available, we will make sure to send the link out to all of the registrants. So you will get an email following up when the recording is available with a direct link. Second of all, as you go through the session today, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those in the Q&A section. Type in any questions that pop into your head, but please be patient. We will be answering those at the end of the panel. And then lastly, I just wanted to let you know, since we have such a wonderful panel of people here today, if you want to adjust your view so that you can see the faces a little bit bigger, in between the title slide and the cameras, there should be sort of a little taskbar with sort of that little 3 lines thing. If you click on that, you can adjust your view so you can see more of us if you'd like, or less of us. It's up to you. All right, that wraps up all the boring stuff. Let's get into the good stuff. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I'd like to say welcome to everybody to our Women in Technology panel, focusing on women in theater. My name is Chris Schyvinck, and I'm president and CEO of Shure. And I'm coming to you live from Shure headquarters in Niles, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. For those of you who may not know Shure by name, you might recognize the work that we've done with theaters globally on the audio side. From handheld mics to the smallest lavalier microphones that we hide in wigs and costumes to wireless transmitters and receivers, Shure has really played a major role in theater production. Now, I know that all of you have actually seen our microphones dozens of times, but unlike us, you don't walk around and point them all out to your family and friends. So at Shure, we've taken a bigger role recently in advocating for more diversity in the industry, especially when it comes to women in theater. I began my career as an engineer at Shure more than 33 years ago now, and I got into this current role of president and CEO back in 2016. But I wasn't the first female leader here. Rose Shure had led the company previous to that since 1995. So if you do the math, that's 27 years, almost 3 decades of a manufacturing and technology company with a female at the helm. And I can tell you with certainty that's very, very unusual. But enough about Shure. I really am excited about this very distinguished panel that we have here today. Great women in the theater industry from all over the world. And we're also joined by all of you attendees from all over the world as well. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Today, we're going to hear from our panelists about the opportunities that they've experienced in theater and the challenges that they've needed to tackle to get more women involved in theater, and the part that we all play in that, actually. So let's get into introductions, and I'll take it in alphabetical order. And I'm going to start with Toy DiOrio here in Chicago. Toy.
Hi there. I'm Toy DiOrio. It's Victoria DiOrio, but everyone knows me as Toy. I have been designing for almost 30 years now, and I am also the head of sound design at DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. I'm also a composer, too.
Thank you, Toy.
Mhm.
How about Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Farina. I'm primarily a musical mixer and a A2 for musicals. I do a little bit of design, but my focus is really in mixing and A2 work. I've been doing this for about 14 years now, primarily working in Chicago, but kind of dabbling all over the U.S. when needed.
Thank you. Let's take it outside the U.S. and go to Nancy, who is joining us all the way from Hong Kong. Nancy.
Hello, I'm Nancy. I'm currently working at West Kowloon Cultural Authorities. I joined theater in about 1997. Yeah, and I started doing the sound design and mixing engineer for a long time, actually. Yeah, so here I am.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. And Vicky, let's hear from you. In the UK.
Hi. Yeah, in the UK. I'm Vicky. I'm London-based, although currently working in Manchester. I am a front of house operator for theatre. I do shows in the UK, in the West End, and also on tour, both in the UK and internationally. Predominantly musical theatre, but also plays, and I've also done some work with Cirque du Soleil.
Okay. Well, thank you all for the introductions. We're really happy we could get you all together in one place at one time. It was not easy. So as you can see, there's just a ton of talent and experience here. For those of you that are watching, just a note that I'm going to go through a round of questions here, and as the conversation is evolving, if you yourself have questions, please type those into the Q&A box, and we'll get to some of those towards the last half hour of this session. So I want to start with question number 1, and I'll go in reverse order of how I just called on you. So we'll start with Vicky on this one. I want to hear from each of you how you got into theater, and if there's either someone or something that inspired you to come into this career. So Vicky, let's start with you.
Oh, it's a big question, isn't it? So I have quite an academic background. So I was at university studying French and English literature, and I spent all of my free time in the theatre at my University of Birmingham in the UK, which had a fantastic resources for theatre. I also spent a lot of time up at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is a fantastic thing in the UK if anyone's ever over here in August time. And so then I actually went and trained, not as a sound engineer, but in a sort of multidiscipline course. So it was called Stage Management and Technical Theatre at LAMDA in London, where I wanted to be we call it DSM, but it's a show caller for theatre. But actually then had a little taste of all the other technical disciplines, which I hadn't really had access to before. And realized that sort of mixing shows and the sort of music.
Well, I think we got the beginning part of Vicky there. Her internet has been a little bit in and out. We'll come back to her to hear the rest of that story. Nancy, how about if we hear about how you got into this career?
Yeah, I used to work at Radio Television Hong Kong as production assistant after I graduated from my secondary school. And then that was my first time learning about this business. When I first got into the studio, I was like, wow, this is a spaceship. I want to sit at that position. So, and then I asking around how I can be that person. And then someone told me that I can get into the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts. They have this certain subject. So I get into the academy, and that's how I started my business and career.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephanie, how did you get here?
I've been doing theater forever, right? So like since I was a child. And then I went to college to be a high school drama teacher. I thought I was going to teach little kids about theater. I did that for about 6 months, and I was like, not right now, not so much. And my college roommate at the time this was in Florida. My college roommate at the time was moving to Chicago to do theater things. And I was like, that sounds great, because that's what you do when you're 22. You just go and do things. And so I moved to Chicago. I kind of studied all disciplines because I was going to be a teacher. So moved here, applied for all of the internships from Steppenwolf to Looking Glass to Goodman to all of them. And David Naughton at the Goodman was the one who called me back. And I knew enough about audio, but I had a lot to learn. And so I'll always remember my first interview with Dave. He was kind of like, well, I'm not paying you, so I have nothing to lose. And then he hired me. So I kind of learned everything on the job there. Just asked a bunch of questions and just kind of moved my way up, kind of in the school of hard knocks, for lack of a better term. And 14 years later, I'm still here.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Toy, we'll hear from you, then we'll see if we can get back to Vicki again.
Sure. I actually began as a ballet dancer, and I was in a regional ballet company by age 10. I was dancing with Joffrey Ballet by age 14. I danced a little bit with the New York City Ballet, but then I decided to go to college and got a degree in musical theater. But then I went to London and studied at RADA and Lambda because I really loved classical acting and directing. So I thought I'd come to Chicago after school to do that, and I did for a little bit, but then I gave it all up and joined a rock and roll band, and then had my own band for a while. And at that time, I had helped found a theater company that was focusing on women in theater, and Rivendell Theater Ensemble here in Chicago. And they asked me to sound design and compose for show. And from that point on, it just kind of took off. And I have no training whatsoever at that time. My training has been on the ground learning for the past almost 30 years. And it's been a wild ride at this point.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think Vicki popped in, and I think we actually lost her again. So we're going to have to figure out how to incorporate her back into some of the discussion here when she comes back.
Hey, Chris.
But I want to, yeah.
It's Cheryl. I told Vicki to turn off her camera to save bandwidth, so I think we'll still have her hopefully on audio.
Oh, good. So Vicki, can you finish your story? It looks like you're muted, I think.
She is trying.
Okay.
Let's maybe.
There.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
There you are.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, everyone. I'm in the basement of a theatre, so the internet is not great. Let me know on the chat if you lose me again. Sorry, I'm going to start again because I actually finished my whole story, but clearly just talking to myself. I went to drama school and studied stage management and technical theatre with the view to be a show caller. And actually, in studying different technical disciplines, found that I really enjoyed mixing shows. The musicality of it tied in really nicely with sort of playing instruments and music, which I also really enjoyed, and the kind of engineering aspects as well. So then I sort of focused on sound. I went and worked with Autograph, who are a hire company here in the UK, and at the National Theatre, and then got jobs working backstage with sound departments, and I've kind of worked my way up through the ranks to now running my own departments and mixing shows and now opening shows. Yeah, that's about it, really.
Okay, thank you, Vicki. It works well. Unfortunately, we just can't see you, which we wish we could. So let's keep it that way for now, because we want to hear from you, because the next question, I'm going to start to get into the heart of the matter a little bit. Stephanie, you referred to the school of hard knocks. So I want to hear from each of you, what kind of challenges you actually faced getting into the industry, maybe early on and even present day and everything in between. So I'll kind of go in a little bit of reverse order here. Toy, how about if we start with you?
Sure. Early on, I don't think I recognized any of the challenges because I was just doing it. I was the only woman in Chicago for a long time designing sound, and I was just doing what I wanted to do, basically. It wasn't until later on that I realized that I was watching careers of men that were starting either alongside with me or after me just kind of succeed and move on, and I wasn't, and I was like, what is going on here? So that's when I started kind of keying into what was actually a barrier to moving forward in my career. So I had to just kind of come to terms with my career being different and not looking at it as looking at success in a different way, and that it was really about who I was working with, the shows I was doing, the kind of jobs I was hired to do, who thought I was a really good collaborator, that kind of thing. And so I focused more on that. And anyway, but I had many times where I wanted to quit and stop because it just was too hard. It was really too hard, and I couldn't get to a level to make enough money to survive on just that alone until much later. but I think what's it's interesting now. So I went through that and then got to a point where I was working pretty regularly. I was working about 25 shows a year or so, and then I got the job at DePaul because I wanted to slow down, which is really not what happened. So I ended up adding another job to my life, and then I was doing about 10 to 15 shows on top of that job, and then I feel like now I'm at a point where, being in my 50s, that I am now recognizing how women become invisible. So I'm now on the other end of that, of like the struggle of, wow, now I have to hustle yet again as an older woman, trying to prove myself, even though I have all these years of experience. It's like I have to remind people I'm still here. I have to remind people that, that women are still valuable, that I've been doing this for this long too. So it's been an interesting kind of journey, and I've never taken any offense by any of it. I mean, there were the times along the ways where you're dealing with sexism, and you deal with it how you deal with it. I had different tactics, I'm sure we all do, of whether you're playing the daughter, you're playing the mother, you're playing the girlfriend, you're playing these roles in order to get through to people, to have them listen to you. And all that kind of stuff that you have to deal with as you kind of go through this career. But it's interesting to see the trajectory of, like, I didn't feel like I struggled much in the beginning, and now I feel like I'm struggling, which is odd. So that's kind of my nutshell.
Thank you, Toy. Stephanie, you used the term hard knocks. So how about from your perspective?
So most of my career has spent in the I know we're all doing the technical end of it, but not a lot of design. So a lot of the actual manual labor and lifting and doing that end of it. And when I started out, right, I started in 2007. It still was, I was the only female in the room. I'm also a member of IATSE Local 2, where there's, let's say there's, the ratio is, 200 to 1. It's not a very good ratio. So in Local 2, it's a really, really great union. It's a great union. It's just, you have to play a game, for lack of a better term, right? This, because we're always kind of striking this balance between, I want to be able to do exactly what the guys are doing, but also still be true to who I am as a person, if that makes any sense. So a really silly analogy is, right, it's a lot of hanging speakers and lifting, running cable is a lot of manual labor. And when I started out, I realized, wait, I don't want, because of my lack of strength, I don't want any of the guys have to make accommodations for me. That was a big thing for me. So I started lifting weights and working out, and now it's oddly enough, it's another career for me. But it's because I want to be able to do exactly what they are doing, right? That's equity is a big, big thing for me. And so I think the biggest struggle I've come into is kind of figuring out how to navigate with the guys around me. I've said this before, right? Some of the people I work with, right? It also depends on generational, depends on age, it depends on a lot of other factors. But a lot of the, for lack of a better term, older generational guys, I usually have to play two different roles. Either I play the role of your daughter, right? I try to have them view me as I am their daughter, and therefore you cannot be mean to me, right? Like, I am this cute, small, I'm petite, but this cute girl who you can't be mean to, let me run my cable, please leave me alone. Or it's this thing of I can hang with you, right? So you give me shit, you give me stuff, I can give it to you right back, right? So if you say something rude to me, I'm gonna do it right back to you, and then now look, we're I'm in that group. It tends to be a little bit of a dance I do a lot, because I also want to stay true to who I am, right? You don't want to lose yourself in that. But a lot of times for me, it comes down to, I just need to work harder. I know that's not kind of what we want to hear, but it's the idea of in order to be accepted as one of the guys, right? I need to be on my stuff, right? I need to make sure that I'm on top of it, which has actually been extremely beneficial to me in a way, because I've had to learn things faster and do things faster, right? And a little bit better. But then there's also situations where it doesn't matter. I grew up at the Goodman, where our audio head, our house audio supervisor was a male, but it happened that most of the team was female centric, and I think I got a lot of self-esteem and a lot of just not really thinking that I was like, this is how it works. We're all just cool. We're getting it done. Not a big deal. Until I left the Goodman after 10 years of being there, that I like, it was also a big culture shock, right? I went from that to then like working gigs with my union. So it was a very different shift to then realizing, oh, okay, I need to shift my mind. I don't know if that makes any sense, but.
Well, it's interesting contrasting your two answers, both of you women here in the U.S. Because Toy, your career kind of went the opposite of how I thought you would express it, right? That things are still, somewhat difficult, and in fact, in some cases more so. And Stephanie, you kind of have taken this chameleon approach in a way, right? Kind of adapting to your changing environment. So it's interesting. I'd like to hear the same from Nancy and then Vicky after that, about your challenges.
Honestly, I don't have those challenges like Stephanie and Toy. I think we are pretty lucky here. But at the moment, because the digital audio is getting very quick pace here. So I think as a mixing engineer, we have to learn almost every brand's mixing console here because they are all different. Unlike the old days, all analog, they are pretty similar. So that's why I don't see that as kind of really challenge. It's a learning process, I would say. And now every brand seems getting more immersive audio. So we have to learn quite a lot, especially the system and also those kind of protocols. So it's a lot to learn and it takes time. So I guess the challenge is we have to keep up ourselves to keep up with the technology.
Ever changing all the time too. New technology every year. Vicky, do we have you by chance?
I hope so. I'm going to leave my camera off. I think that's going to be helpful. Sorry, everyone. It's working in theatre, isn't it? Ask me where are we at?
We're talking about the challenges that you've had breaking into theater as a woman, either at the beginning of your career or even present day challenges. So that's where we're at.
Okay, cool. I mean, I felt very welcomed into theatre. I came in at a level where I was backstage and I was working with the cast. I was putting microphones on people, and I think that's a really welcoming place for women. For me, I found the problem was breaking into that next level, and I got a lot of, oh, but you're so good backstage. Like, you're such a good communicator. Everyone really likes working with you backstage. You're really great with the cast. You're really great with stage management. You should just, do that. You're great at it. And that's probably the place where I've found the barrier, is kind of going, yes, but that's not what I want. I am very good at those things. That doesn't mean I won't also be very good out front. It doesn't mean that I won't also be very good at programming a show or engineering. It just means that I am also very good backstage. So I almost found that was the big barrier for me, was kind of getting people to see me as a leader, as an engineer, as a programmer, rather than necessarily a facilitator and a communicator simply. I think they're all skills that you need altogether, but I think I got kind of pigeonholed in there for a little bit. And I ended up having to be quite ruthless about turning down work that I didn't want, and in pursuit of the work that I did. And it was fine. It worked. I was very fortunate to have lots of people who were up for having a go. Sorry, you can hear calls and things back here now. So that's kind of the tactic that I took, was to kind of be steadfast in pursuing what I wanted to do. And no, it's always there for me, and those skills are still applicable, and that's still great for me to be a manager who can share that knowledge of those other jobs with my teams. But I wanted to be out front. I wanted to be programming. I wanted to be mixing. And I think it's that space that was tricky to get into. And it wasn't necessarily because anyone said I couldn't. It was more that they wanted me to do the other stuff. And now I'm here, I don't find that there's a particular barrier. Now I'm here and I have the credits to my name. I find that I'm treated well and I'm respected. So I'm very lucky. I know it's not necessarily the case for everyone, but in my experience, you know, when you're behind the desk, you know, you're afforded the respect.
Thank you. Well, you all have actually kind of started to segue into the next question around challenges. And I wanted to explore if there was differences by region, either, you know, part of the world or, you know, different parts of the States even. And it was interesting hearing Nancy's answer because she really focused more on the technology challenges that kind of everybody in the industry has, and not so much on specific, you know, challenges around being a woman. So I'm curious what you've all seen in terms of maybe differences from place to place that you've experienced in the past.
I think the strength, yeah, because when I toured to China, mainland China, or like South Korea, when they first saw me as a woman, they were quite surprised. And yeah, well, they don't, honestly, they didn't want to listen to me. Especially in Asia, you know, from the history, where women may be not as high as they think. So yeah, I think
Nancy,
nowadays
I'm sorry to
the
interrupt you,
situation
but
is getting much better.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's pretty fascinating, right? So if they didn't want to listen to you, how did you get them to listen? What did you have to do?
I just do what I have to do and push and insist. And well, after they listen to what I did, then they follow what I want. So I think what I did make them really surprised. Not
So you-
only a man can do what they want. Yeah.
Yeah, so you had to be tenacious. You had to kind of keep going at it. And it sounds like you know your technology well, so I'm sure that helped.
Yes, it does. But you have to know more than most of the men. You have to work harder than them.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Vicky, Toy, or Stephanie, any regional differences or place-to-place differences you've noticed?
This is
Oh.
no, Vicky, you go.
Oh, just while it's all working, I'm just going to get right in there. It's not for me in the UK anyway. It's not necessarily to do with the region. It's more to do with the work. So if I'm touring, it tends to involve more of the sort of engineering side of it. So that tends to be where at first outlook, I tend to find that I have to push quite hard. I've also toured mainland China, and that was problematic for me because obviously language barrier was a big problem going in as an English speaking company, and also I think the expectation is that I wasn't a voice to be listened to, so that was problematic for me. And actually the advice I had, which I'm sure is problematic in some aspect, was you are not going to change everyone, you know, and there is an element of self-preservation, I think, in those situations where I did eventually just go, okay, well, I'm just not going to do that job then, because I'm one person and I need to look after myself as well as, you know, pushing for change. But in that instance, when you're doing a load in or a load out, you do have to look after yourself and go, actually, do you know what? I shouldn't have to make twice as much effort. You know, I shouldn't have to do that. So I'm going to just step aside and go and do something where I can succeed, because I think setting yourself up for failure, I'm not necessarily saying in China, I'm saying in certain environments, if you're batting at a massive disadvantage, then actually sometimes it's great to stand up and try and change the world. In other situations, sometimes you have to go, I deserve better, so I'm going to walk away. And I think that was a big moment of growth for me as an engineer. It's just as big and bold and badass to walk away as it is to stand and fight the fight sometimes.
Stephanie or Toy?
It's actually funny. Me and Toy, I'm often Toy's. It just coincidentally happened. I'm often Toy's associate designer on quite a few shows, especially when we do like musicals and things like that. And recently, actually, we walked into a theater and we gave the theater our paperwork, right? So it was like a pre-production paperwork thing. And this was in a different, it was in a part of the country that you wouldn't normally think this would happen, right? You're like, oh, that's a super, open-minded, cool city, right? So we gave them our paperwork and we got an email back and they just changed all of our paperwork. They were like, actually, we're doing this. And it was like, just completely rewrote our workbook and all of that. I don't know if this was a female thing. I don't know if it was just we're designers and they're house people. And like, right, I can't say it was a gender-based thing. But it was interesting that in a part of the country you would think, it was like it was a part of the country you would think would not happen. It felt very much like me and Toy definitely had to figure out the game we were going to play. I know I keep saying that. I don't know a better word for it, but figure out, okay, so we need to get this achieved. All right, if you go in as, coming from the angle of art and I'll come from the angle of tech, and then if we both prove like, look, we can prove that we both know what we're doing because we have all the bases covered, right? Like, I know a lot of the tech stuff. Toy knows the tech stuff, and she also knows really the artistic stuff, so we can kind of get this done. I've experienced that in that area, and then I've also gone with some corporate shows into like convention centers, and not necessarily regionally, but in general, that different sect of sound, right? It always proves to be a bit harder there. I toured to Philly one time, and that was a bit of a challenge just to, again, being a female, and I think also being a petite female doesn't help me on either side. So it was a bit of a challenge, again, like everybody else was saying, to get them to listen to you, right? And it took, just like everybody else is saying, took me, and there's lights. Oh, good, you can listen to me. Okay. It took me having to do the work, right? It took me having to be like, and the show sounds good, and it happened, and we did it in 45 seconds, and look, okay, now you guys can listen to me? Great. So it always takes a like extra step being like, okay, look, I did what you did, but blindfolded with my hands tied behind my back, so now I know what I'm doing. Great, cool. It always takes an extra step. In different, yeah, I don't know, in big cities it tends to be a little bit easier than smaller towns I've worked in, but it's kind of, yeah.
So I would also add to that too that regionally it's not that much of a difference regionally. What it really is when it becomes more of a commercial market. The commercial market for women in sound is a lot different than the regional market for women in sound. And I would say New York being the largest commercial market in the States, that's probably where I think women have struggled the longest and the hardest to be seen and be hired and be part of the conversations. And it's only really recently that this has been shifting in our favor, thank God. I don't know if it was because of TSDC, but the Theatrical Sound Designers and Composers Association really made a big deal when the Tony was taken away from sound designers, and we all gathered together trying to figure out why that would even happen. And then that brought in a kind of a movement towards networking and understanding all different points of view in sound and bringing the nation together. It's a very large nation of sound designers. So trying to, figure out what was a West Coast designer, composer, or technician versus what was mid and what was East Coast and what was Southern, what was Northern, so it was just trying to figure out like how to balance it all and have a networking situation for everybody. So I think that's helped a lot on our end to have a place to vent, a place to find support, to have advocacy, to reach out to, Shure is one of the corporate members of TSDCA, like all these other companies have joined us as well. So I think that's helped bridging the gap and help fostering forward movement, but up until then it was very, very challenging. So that's kind of what I see regionally.
You're actually helping me kind of segue into the next round of questions here, more solutioning and problem solving, I guess. So you mentioned a couple of different organizations there, Toy. So I'll start with you and Stephanie in the States, and then move on. What do you think can and should be done to get more women involved in theater, and especially on the audio production side? We'll go Toy, then Stephanie.
I think one of the things that would be really helpful is that if theaters recognize that sound is not always a one-person team, and that sometimes there's an aversion to having more than one or two people on a sound team for a show, especially on musicals, which seems so absurd to me in Chicago, especially, and most of the regionals actually. So it's I think the idea of bringing in associates or next generation or those that do not have experience in certain venues to learn and be there and be part of the process would move forward women in sound, because they will be the next people they hire. They get to know the people that are there. They know how it all runs. They know how it works. They know what's expected of them, and that's just one way to foster more inclusion, is to allow those that have the experience that keep getting hired to bring in those that do not have that experience and try to foster that to continue forward. So I think that's one way.
Stephanie, what do you think?
I'm almost completely echoing Toy on this. Yeah, I think it is like a grassroots type of idea. You know, when you get in the door, hold the door open for the one behind you. You know, like that idea of like, absolutely having no competition between women. Do you know what I mean? Like having the thing of like, hey, I have this gig. Why don't you come with me? You'll be my associate assistant, whatever title you want, doesn't matter, right? And you'll get choicing. You get to meet the people. You get to know them. Quite often, this business, there's no really resumes, right? It's just all word of mouth. So not necessarily specifically, you know, recommending women. Obviously, like we want to be inclusive, period. But if there's an opportunity to put women in a position to succeed, I think we should do that. And just like Vicky was saying, not just in the A2 positions, not just in the quote unquote motherly positions, right? Like the ones of like, oh yeah, we really want a female A2 because then they can mic the children. It's like, okay, well, let's, you know, the idea of like putting women in the position of decision making and putting women in the position that gets the recognition, not just the like great woman behind every great man thing, but actually like, no, there's a woman behind the console mixing the show. There's a woman behind the desk. I think bringing women with you on those journeys, and then not echoing right, just like Vicky was saying, her challenge, like people being like, no, you should stay backstage. Maybe try to be the voice that says, actually, don't stay backstage. Actually, I know they're all saying that, but do it. What's the worst that happens? You go backstage? Okay. You know, like kind of pushing each other in that way to take the risk, because especially after the pandemic, like what do we have to lose? You know what I mean? Like take the licks, take the risks, take the leaps, and really finding those younger girls and female identifying people to really like grab them and drag them up. You know what I mean? Say, I know it's scary. I know there's a bunch of dudes here. You're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. You're going to get through this. We have to break this. That's kind of, I think, the best way to do it.
Stephanie and Toy, are there, pardon my ignorance for not knowing this, but are there any sort of forums or networking organizations where you can find, you know, the more junior people, or is it more on the job and the word of mouth that you talked about earlier?
I'm quite lucky that I'm head of a program that actually recruits a lot of young women and female identifying people into my program. And then because and Stephanie's an adjunct in the program, so we tend to train them and then bring them with us as we move on in shows and stuff. As they get to a certain level, they come with us on shows. So so that's one way we've done it, but I don't think there's anything that's an actual.
There's actually
There's the online.
There's a Facebook group called Women Plus, and I can send you the exact name, but it's essentially like Women Plus in Theater Facebook group. And it tends to be a pretty great forum to like vent or also get resources or, yeah, it's something Women Plus in Theater. I don't know the exact name of it. If somebody knows it, please let me know. But it's, yeah, it's something of like Women Plus. That Facebook group is really great. TSDCA, like Toy was saying, is a great place. There's a lot, it's a very, especially in positions of power, there's a lot of women there. And it tends to be a pretty safe space to speak up. Those are the two main ones. And then, yeah, the rest of it is just, I would say reach out to universities, like universities in your area, email the department head and say, hey, I'm looking for da-da-da. Do you have any students that you recommend? I mean, people do that to Toy constantly. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So let's go overseas with that same theme. So first Nancy and then Vicky. What do you think in your part of the world can be done to get more women involved in theater? Start with you, Nancy.
I can't agree more with Toy and Stephanie. Yeah, they almost include everything. Yeah, I think the Academy does a great job here in Hong Kong. We are pretty lucky, and we have a lot of girls in the Academy studying sound or lighting. So actually in Hong Kong, our business, there are a lot of women,
Mm-hmm.
no matter lighting or sound, not only the stage. Yeah, we got women in every aspect. Yeah, and getting more and more at the meantime. I can see the more graduates are women.
That's
So
great to
in the
hear.
near future, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And in the near future, I think you will, I'm going to see quite a lot of female sound designers and sound engineers. I'm pretty sure it's good here at the moment.
Well, Vicky, can you compete with that? How about in the UK?
Oh gosh. So listen, I think I completely echo what we're saying. Like we need to be providing opportunities, and if we don't look around and see someone immediately, we need to look a little harder. And we also need to be I would like I trained with lots of women. I know lots of women who I'd consider my peers. And when I look up at the people who went maybe the generation before me, I don't see as many women doing specifically what I do. So that's engineering and operating rather than design. I can't really speak to design. And so I found when I was training that I didn't see many people doing what I do now, many women doing what I do now. And I think there is something about managing a sound department and running a sound department that involves a management style. And I didn't see the style that I wanted to have anywhere. So I think it's about making sure that people can see you doing it. And that will hopefully inspire people to think that they can do it. I think it's turned into a bit of a cliche now, hasn't it? The you can't be what you can't see. And I think that's a thing. And I think it's bringing people along with you, inspiring them to be brave and to apply for that job, even though they don't feel like they tick every single box, and having that confidence that they could still be the best person for the job, even though they're not hitting all of the criteria in the way that they maybe feel that they should before they apply. I'm a big fan of applying for the job that you want rather than necessarily the job that you should already have. But also what I will say is that we should further that by then providing support for people as they enter those roles for the first time or second time or third time, because it's rough, because of the way other people treat you, because of some horrendous acts of sexism and discrimination and intimidation. I went through it all, and I looked around looking for women to speak to about it, and I couldn't really find anyone. And I think that's what we need to be doing is letting people come and speak about those injustices, and not assigning blame to women or anyone who's trying their best. And I think it's that support bit that we need to work on. And I don't think it's ever a bad thing to have more support.
Well, picking up on that theme of support, I have a question. I'll go back to the States first and then back to Nancy and Vicky. What would you all like to see more companies do to support the efforts? And that could be, anybody from a company like ours to the ones that you're talking about where you deal more with commercial environments, corporate sort of environments. What do you think we could be doing? How about Toy and then Stephanie?
Well, I would say what you're doing right now is having a webinar with women speaking, and that alone is enough to open up avenues for those that are seeking for support or understanding of what they need to do in order to move forward. So I think that's really important. Like I said, I think companies can hire more than one or two people on sound, for especially on the big shows, and I don't know. Steph, what do you think? You're more in the commercial.
Yeah, I think like, oop, moving my mic. Sorry, guys. Hold on. We'll adjust this. There we go. And now it's drooping again. It's on a mic stand. We're doing great. Okay. I think it's more of like as opposed, I'm not going to give any specific answer because I don't have one. I have more of like it needs to be kind of a cultural shift, an ideological shift. This is a really silly analogy. I was at Noodles and Company the other day, and the employees, it was like at night, they were about to close. It was on our dinner break from TAC. And the employees were playing really fun music in the back and like dancing as they were cooking. And it was interesting, just this idea of like allowing them to have fun at work, right? And then I remember talking about it, and I was like, well, that probably comes down from the top, right? Like the management is allowed, they're not saying don't listen to music. And I think that idea of management not perpetuating this concept, these really kind of toxic concepts that we've created in theater of like work until you're gonna die, and then like lift heavy things all the time, and dudes know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like we've kind of this cultural thing of like the guy's in charge, the guy has the power, and nobody intentionally does it, right? It's all subliminal, it's all things we've been learned from birth, all these kind of things. But I think having just maybe like a shift in the ideas of the people who are in charge of like thinking about it more, right? The same thing we do with the rest of the world, even with all the microaggressions and all these things, this idea of just thinking about it twice, you know, like, and I think it has to start from the top. It has to start from until us lowly workers see it, you know what I mean? Until like the people running the cable and mixing the consoles and all these things see it from the top of like, oh, they're actually treating that woman the same way they're treating me, or it's not some weird subliminal, oh, I have that, sweetheart, let me grab that case. You know what I mean? There's not that.
Mhm.
And I do think just talking about it, right? I know so many guys I work with are like, well, I want to help you with that, but I don't want to offend you. And I'm like, just ask me. Just say, hey, do you need help with that? And if I do, I'll be like, actually, I think so much is really heavy. Or actually, no, I got it. Like, I think creating a culture in a workplace that isn't so, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing, I don't want to do the wrong thing, but something of like, ask, let's talk about it, just like we're doing now, right? Like, be curious about, you know, you see a woman behind a console, she's the only one in the entire room. Make an environment that's safe to kind of be like, hey, does it suck for you to be the only woman? Well, actually, this is what I'm dealing with. Da, 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 da. You know, I don't have any concrete, but that kind of more ethereal. Yeah.
But I would also add to that too, Steph, just if I can jump in to say that it's got to be more than just a gesture. Like right now, there are a lot of gestures of inclusion, and they sometimes get pretty empty, and it's because they're not backed up by actual true inclusion of actually understanding the human condition of like having somebody in the workspace that is not normally there, or you know has a different viewpoint.
It can't just be words or surface stuff. It has to be actions, behaviors, all the rest of it.
Exactly.
I can't tell if we may have lost Vicky, so I want to ask Nancy first. The same question. How would you see companies, corporations, more of the commercial environment being able to do things differently or help support better?
It's not an easy question here. As the management, I would like to start with balancing the two gender. So yeah, so maybe we can make the ratio between men and women, like I would like to see 5-5, but sometimes maybe 4-6. So that's a good start. Yeah, maybe I would try to ask for the established women sound designer or mixing engineer to see if they have anyone who can recommend. So getting from them and asking the academy. So in the theater business in Hong Kong, is still a very small business. Almost everyone knows each other. So I think recommendation is quite important. And I don't really know what else we can support these efforts. Yeah,
Yeah.
but to what we can do.
Okay. All right. Well, I have affirmation that Vicky is still with us. So, Vicky, do you want to chime in on that?
I am still here. You can hear me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Um, Again, I completely support what everyone else has said. I think it's great. I think what would be really great is if theatre generally, and I don't know what it's like for you guys over there, but in the UK, I think we do need to look at a structure where job sharing and part-time work is available. I think that would increase the opportunities for people. And I also think that would feed into, which we haven't spoken about here, but I will still say that things like maternity leave and care responsibilities are still women's, lean heavily on the female and female identifying population. And so I think that's not something we're going to solve overnight, but I think theatre should try and move closer to those kind of structures. They're not things that affect me personally, but they are things that I know will move women away from theatre as they move into higher roles, because it's not very accommodating for having families or care responsibilities. And I think exactly the same. I think we need to be looking at apprenticeships and shadowing and associate roles in a much more structured way, and paid opportunities to learn, and ensuring that we are offering those to the people that we want to see doing the roles ultimately. I also think creating environments where we have the space and support to try and sometimes fail. I think we work in a creative industry, and often the way tech is structured doesn't really allow for people to try, because they have to already know, they have to already have done it, they have to already proven that they can do it. I don't think we make enough space for trial and error. And I think if we did that, people might be more willing to try the roles. And that comes from the top down. That's, providing people with the opportunities to be mentored and be taught, and then go and try for themselves without getting fired the moment they try something in tech and it doesn't work. And I think we are seeing I think cancel culture is a thing that it does apply to what we do too. I think someone can try something in a show and it not work out, and then they don't get booked again. And I think that's really sad, because I think every show is different, and what we do is creative, and there isn't one way. And because somebody has a different creative brain doesn't necessarily mean that they are not suitable for what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, I definitely have my own opinions in this space as well about how companies can help, and it's great hearing some of the aspirations that you all have, like Nancy saying, wouldn't it be great if, it could be more of a 50-50 environment? And then, we talked about job shadowing and apprenticeships and finding people earlier. And that is definitely a hypothesis that I have, that you have to get some mind share of youth at a pretty early stage, because they start to form opinions even at a high school level about where they think they may go in life. And there's not a good level of awareness about what your jobs are actually like. And there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So if there's ways for companies, to join different organizations or support organizations that make that introduction a little bit earlier in somebody's life, it really opens up their mind. And maybe they, you use the word creative, Vicky, right? I mean, this is a great venue. Any kind of tech job involves creativity, but sometimes those dots don't always get connected. So ways to make that introduction happen earlier in life is certainly a way that I think companies can help, if we find the right, organizations to help us with that. So that actually segues into my last question before we go to the audience. What message would the five of you have for many of the students or young professionals that may be joining us today, or even the veterans for that matter, that are online now listening to us? How would you promote them to get into theater or to do more to get involved? What kind of message do you have? Let's start with Toy first.
I would say, first of all, you have to really want to do this job. It's really hard, but there is a factor of being compelled to do it that helps you to do this, and just to face the struggles, I think. But I would say find a mentor, find somebody that you can talk to. There are many times where you will come against things where I always call it the reaction versus response, where you will have a reaction to something based on the kind of sexism or just the inequities that will come up, and you need a place to vent that and to react, but that's not necessarily how you would respond in space until you learn how to make those responses in the space on the second. That comes with experience. So that helps too, moving forward. But I would say find others find the job that you want to do, find someone who's doing that job, and then ask them to be your mentor or to help you or to just give them information. I find that most of the older generation is very willing to pass down language and experience and understanding to a younger generation or people that don't know, because we want to make it a better space. So I think that's don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask to shadow somebody or to be in a space with other people. That's really important.
Stephanie, what would you add to that?
The standard thing I say to all of my students all the time, right? I say, you're gonna learn all these tech things from me. I don't care if you don't learn anything else. I want you to remember 3 things. Be on time, bring a wrench, and don't be a jerk. I feel like if you follow those 3 things, you will succeed in any job ever. So, and I had somebody ask another panel, you don't have to actually bring a wrench. It's the idea of being prepared, right? But yeah, those are my 3 things. And the other thing is kind of echoing what Vicky said, do not be afraid to fail. I know it feels like, I love telling my students on the first day my failure stories. Like, I love being like, look guys, I got fired from some major shows, and then I went and cried, and then I was sad for a little bit, and then I found the next show to go mix and be like, oh look, I don't completely suck at this, right? Like, it's okay, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes, and those mistakes are gonna sit with you, and you're gonna ruminate on them. Especially, the stereotype is true, especially being women, we want to please, we want to impress, we want to, do better than everything. You're going to have that mistake. I was like thinking about the other day a mistake I made. This show was a disaster when I first started, and I was like, you think about those things and they're going to ruminate, but you know what, you'll be okay, you'll survive, and then you will just get through it and you'll keep going. So just, it's okay, you're going to fail, you're probably going to get fired, it's cool, you got fired, great, you'll be upset about it, and then you'll go get another job. And then that one, you won't do the same mistake because you did it already. So yeah, don't be afraid to fail. It's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Nancy, what are your thoughts around what you would tell younger folks, trying to get into this industry?
Don't be afraid to ask, no matter a questions or an opportunity. Yeah, like in my old time, I came up to the sound designer and told them I want to do the sound mixing for this show. So I grabbed the job. So don't be afraid to ask. Or even some you think you are silly, that is a silly question, but actually that is not. So be more courageous.
Mm-hmm. Vicky, how about you?
I'm going to say you should always apply for jobs and go to the interview and meet the people. And I think if you feel that that's maybe I can't do that job, but I'd like to be the number 2 on it, I think you should apply for it anyway. And I think you should go and meet the people. And as long as you're polite and as long as you're nice and as long as, you're not wasting anyone's time by going and speaking to them, they are paid to do that. So I think you should always apply and then see where that road takes you, and build those connections. And I think you should have a deep bench, because I think this is a really isolating role sometimes, because we are so fleeting that we go from one show to another show to another show, and I think you need a bench of people who can help you navigate. And I think that extends to, I've been offered this contract and I'm not sure if the terms are right, and you should be able to send that to some people to look at for you, who you trust and who will help you with any issues. And I think that's important. And I think being open about where you're at is a very endearing quality, no matter where you are in your career, whether you're at the beginning and you're asking for help, or whether you're established and you're asking for help, or you're offering help. And I think those are fantastic qualities that we all could do with a bit more of. So be generous, be kind, be on time, and back up your show files. That's all I've got.
Sounds like some good summaries there and some good advice. So with that, I'm actually going to turn things back over to Cheryl again at this point, because we do have questions that have come in from the audience and we want to be able to address those. So Cheryl, hello.
Hello, I'm so happy to be back. That was super inspiring. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. And we've got some really good questions here. So first question here, I particularly like this one. How do you all avoid burnout from having to go the extra mile to get respect?
I wish I knew, actually.
I was like, if you find out, please tell me.
I wish I knew. If someone finds the formula for that, you let me know. I think boundary setting is a really big one. I think, and I sort of spoke about this a bit earlier on, it's not your job to fix the world. Sometimes you have just got to look after yourself. And I think, wisdom is knowing the balance between this is something I'm going to fight for, and I'm going to stand here firm. And sometimes it's, do you know what? If they want to lift that, they should lift that. Saves me a job. And I think you shouldn't beat yourself up about that. I also think my favorite, that's not my job, is quite a good one at the moment, which is when I'm being asked to do things that are beyond what's possible for one person to do. Standing back and going, no, I'm not going to do that. You should have hired someone else to do that, is also, it's empowering to be able to sort of say, no, I'm your operator, not your associate. I'm not going to sit here for hours making that for you, because that's not what I'm being credited for. And we have a big problem with that, I think, in the UK, because our union maybe isn't quite as strong. So there's a lot of blurred lines between job roles, and knowing what's possible for you within what you as a human can manage in a day, and standing firm, I think is a really important thing. And then allowing other people to do that and support them. Everyone needs to survive. It is a job. We forget that, because I think we are all drawn to it for sort of personal reasons, and we don't do it for the glamour or the money or the fame. So I think there's a lot of pressure on us to give everything to it. And I think for me, COVID and the theatre shutting down and how that all worked out really proved to me that actually it doesn't love me back in quite the same way every day. And so I need to be firmer about those boundaries, and if people don't respect that, I need to make them. I need to be very clear about what I can and can't manage. And I need to, I can't be good at mixing the show if I'm spending all day hauling flight cases, so actually, I know myself, and it's taken me a long time to have the confidence to advocate for myself in a work environment without feeling that I'm being weak, or I'm being all of those other words that get applied to women, stroppy or assertive or aggressive or all that sort of stuff. So I think it's being brave, as brave when it comes to advocating for yourself as you would be advocating for somebody else.
And there's sort of a related question here, if any of you have more to add about avoiding burnout. But a related question is, as working in professional theater can take a lot of your time and there's weird hours, in addition to setting those boundaries, how do you find a work-life balance? Because that's really important to avoiding burnout in general. Is it possible, ladies?
I think it is. It's really hard. It's really hard because a lot of people will demand a lot from you. And this is actually a big topic we're now talking about at DePaul as well. on top of the boundary setting, like Vicky was saying, I think it's, at least for me personally, right? This is kind of a personal thing. I don't know if it can apply to everybody, but I'm a big people pleaser. I want everybody to think Stephanie is great at her job at all times. And I think I'm learning that, you know what, that doesn't really matter that much. And I think really kind of, again, echoing what Vicky was saying, being true to yourself in that way and knowing that you're good at what you're doing. And if person X doesn't think so because you did not give them your kidney, that's okay. You know, like, it's okay that if you set a boundary and now they're mad about it, it doesn't mean you're doing a crap job. It just means that they have to find another way to do it. And I think what I've been telling myself a lot lately is that we're not doing brain surgery. We're making grown people louder and softer as they wear costumes. Like, nobody's dying. And I think remembering that there is no such thing as a sound emergency. Like we think there is, but in actuality, the world will still turn.
I would also say that boundary, like this is, when you think about burnout, you're hearing everybody talking very personally, right? Burnout could be physical burnout, could be mental burnout, spiritual burnout, could be so many different things that is causing that reaction. You have to be able to reflect and see yourself and understand your boundaries, understand where you're at, and then apply what you think is the remedy for you. So I am very much of, if I am so excited about a show, I will absolutely go above and beyond and never feel it and be fine and totally and get through it and be great. If there's something that I'm feeling like I'm not getting back from it, then I will start feeling burnt out because it ends up feeling like it's out of balance in a way. When those moments happen, I realize I have to fix something. I have to do something to make that balance better, which means I have to go walking in the woods. I have to go get a massage. I have to go soak in a tub. I have to do something that is for me. I have to paint so I don't hear. Like anything that you do for yourself, for your own self-care, to kind of get you out of that mindset and go, okay, now I can go back into this environment. Now I can go back into this job. I can do this again. So for me, burnout feels more like a betrayal. I'm not getting what I thought I was going to get, the interruption of expectation thing, rather than the artist who will want to go above and beyond. So those are all things that you have to be really self-reflective about and understand for yourself how you're going to approach each and every moment as you go through it.
I love that perspective on it. You know, that's such a great perspective, Toy. This next question is specifically for Nancy. Nancy, earlier you were saying that there's a lot of women already in the field in Hong Kong. Would you say it's moving to almost be as equal to the amount of men in the field? And are there women in decision-making positions?
Yes, they are. I think the portion is like kind of like 50-50 now. So it's a big progress. Yeah. I think in Hong Kong, women are pretty lucky.
That is inspiring. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. So come to Hong Kong.
All right. Next question. When was the first time you saw another woman working and felt represented?
My first internship at the Goodman, there was the head of audio there, Lily West. She was mixing the show, so I was really lucky that my very first internship, I saw a woman heading up the program. That's why it was such a culture shock when I left the Goodman 10 years later to then see that not there. So I was lucky to see that at the very beginning of my career.
I did not.
I didn't really, and I don't think that's necessarily because there weren't women doing it when I was coming up. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think maybe I wasn't aware of them, and I worked with and for a lot of really great male heads of sound. I'm not going to slam them at all because they were great and they taught me a lot, but I learned how to do it as a bloke, and I didn't necessarily know. I wasn't ready for how different it would be for me. And so I think I felt the injustice really acutely when I started running departments and running shows, because I had seen all these men, you know, just be accepted. And so I had high expectations that it didn't occur to me that that's not what would happen for me, because I'd never seen a woman or heard a woman talk about how hard it was. And so I took it really personally, actually. And to a large extent, I still do. I take it really personally when I'm not treated fairly at work, because I've seen so many people have better experiences. Now I know a lot of my peers who are women and who are doing fantastic jobs, running great big shows in the West End and doing a job that no one could do as well. And it's great, and it's a fantastic source of support now. And I always point women who I meet who are coming up at as many women as I can, because you don't need more. You don't need only one mentor. You need as many as you can get, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would actually echo exactly what Vicky's saying too. But I think because I was in Chicago, I was unaware there were women in other cities that were doing it. I learned later that they were doing that. So it's interesting that I saw that. And I say the same thing, that the men who were surrounding me were fantastic as well. So I did not feel that much when I started. But I saw it more in the scenic design world and in the lighting design world when I was in meetings with one other women, because I was the only woman normally on a team, but I would see finally like a scenic design woman come in and of my generation or older, and hearing how a technical director would talk to them and watching how they would then react to that. So mine was more of in the design field. I was seeing it in other design fields, and that was actually helping me understand how I could represent in my field.
Fantastic. All right. Here's a good question, especially coming from a company like Shure. How have you seen technology for theater change over the course of your career? And would you say it's better now or worse? Any things of note there that you'd like to point out that you've seen change over the years?
My first show was on reel to reel. So I've seen a lot of change. I love this discussion with my students too, of like going through how those new technologies came in and how it affected us and how we became faster at our jobs and how we became more efficient, and trying to explain what a plugin actually is and the algorithm, what it used to be of like an actual component that you plugged in and there were knobs, like the idea of like where it came from to where it is now. Is so fascinating of a journey to kind of look at all at once. What I find interesting, though, is that because it is button pushing, what I see is less artistic innovation. Where when it was first kind of blossoming, there was like, oh, we have this new tool, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. Now it feels like we learn these ways the way they do them, and I'm like, but because we don't know any better to think outside of the box now, because it's just buttons. So it's interesting what technology has done to the creative side, but it's remarkable to see how technology has made us more efficient and more creative and more interesting of a field, in my opinion, on the design side. And I can let the technicians now talk about the technical side.
One of the really funny things, looping it, I mean, it's changed incredibly, right? Like, it's insane, right? Like, I can't even, from 2007 to now, like, I remember the Opera House, I did Jesus Christ Superstar here at the Lyric Opera, and we were one of the first people to get Shure Axions. And I remember it was like, oh my God, look, we can change frequencies remotely. This is amazing. There's so many actors. But what's really interesting, kind of looping this back into the women discussion, is it literally happened to me the other day. I'm going to whisper because I'm going to later. It literally happened to me the other day where it was like, hey, Steph, do you know how to operate wireless workbench? And I'm like, yeah. Actually, I was on the beta test of it. You know what I mean? It's interesting how you get that little bit, like they don't mean it, but it's like, you didn't ask the dude if he knew how to operate it. You know what I mean? And then once I go, actually, if you Google search Shure wireless, that's me. That's my picture on Google. Hey, that's me right there. Like, it's kind of funny when like that, the technology going, there's just an assumption that because we're women, we're more artistic, right? And we know how to put the mics on. But then, like, when you're like, actually, yeah, they asked me questions about that. It's always kind of fun to be like, yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of a little tie into that. Yeah.
I think here sometimes people just want to use the technology, but they don't know how to use it, and they didn't really think. And yeah, and as a sound technician or sound engineer, we just need to explain to them and maybe help them to create their work. And sometimes, maybe trying to inspire those kind of designers. It's quite interesting sometimes when you see they are just want to use the technology, but they really don't know how to use.
Mhm.
All right. And now for a really fun question. Do you have a favorite show you've worked on? And if so, why? Vicky, why don't we start with you on that one?
Oh gosh, the thing is that I like variety. I like working on new work. So whilst I'll say what my favorite has been so far, it does not mean that I would want to do that show for 10 years. And you know, I like being in tech. So my favorite to date has been opening the Lehman trilogy, which I worked on in the West End. The blend of kind of technical, and I'm going to go back to how theatre's evolved. That whole show ran on a network, and I was on that show going, there's no copper on this show. Everything's running over the network. And that's crazy to me. It makes sense and it works really well, but it is a crazy thought. And so I think a lot of what we do now is computer driven, and being computer literate is a very important part of what we do now, which is a massive evolution even over my working lifetime. So yes, I love working on the Image Trilogy because I liked working with Nick Powell, who's a composer, sound designer, and also Don Bilkey, who is a very incredibly technically minded designer, and the blend of both of those things is incredible on that show, and it really does push the envelope of what is possible when you put someone incredibly creative with someone who has an incredible technical imagination together, and then obviously the content is also fantastic. So yes, there we go.
Nancy, do you have a favorite?
I don't have a favorite, but I have a very challenging one. I still remember after 10 years. That was a touring show, and I did it sound designer and mixing engineer for mainland China touring musical. Yeah, the challenge is the language barrier, and also the man versus women job over there. Yeah, and it's sometimes the political reason we have to dismantle the whole system and then set up again in like 4 hours and start the show. So it's very challenging. That's why it's still well, I won't say it's my favorite, but it's top of my memory.
It sticks with you.
Yes.
Toy, how about you? Do you have a favorite?
I can't really say I have a favorite. There have been hundreds down the line that have inspired and changed me in so many ways that I can't even respond. I tend to look at who am I working with and what is the show. I had the great fortune of, because I was one of the only women in Chicago, I worked on a lot of diverse shows coming up, and I learned so much about different cultures and different things that I never would have learned in history and things in theater that I feel like I'm an expert in a trivia team. So anybody in theater, I think, is an expert in a trivia team because of that. But to me, it's like who you work with. So, I mean, like Stephanie and I every time we work together is like, I look forward to those days every single time, because it's just it's always the lasting thing through it all to me are the people and how the stories have affected you. So that's what kind of is the through line as we move forward. It's not necessarily, what the show, like working on a show, like to me, it's about bigger issues. So that's what I'll say.
And last but not least, Stephanie, do you have a favorite or a memorable?
Yeah, I have, I guess there's different categories for me. Like, one of my favorites to mix was West Side Story here at the Lyric. It was just, they're always fun because they're big cast, and it was just a good show, and it was just a really great time. So probably that's one of my favorites. And, there's different things, right? Another one is like every experience gives you a little bit of a memory. So like, and there's little like boxes you tick. Like, this is gonna sound like a name drop. I promise it isn't. But mixing like Renee Fleming here was like, oh my god, I'm mixing Renee Fleming. This is amazing. Like that kind of thing. And then like Toy was saying, there's other ones that are my favorite just because I had a really good time. You know, like there was one I did during the pandemic. We did it was called Twilight Gods, where like people drove up in their cars. It was 10 cars at a time driving up a parking structure. And we did the Ring trilogy in 6 different scenes. And just the energy, I mean, it was also really cool to mix into people's cars and 6 scenes at once. Like that techno end of it was really, really neat. But just the like energy from even the grumpiest crew members were like excited to be there because we were working October 2020. Do you know what I mean? And just kind of like that community sense that we built of like, because nobody really knew what was going on. Nobody knew how it like it was a bunch of uncertainty and a bunch of fear. And the fact that we could still make this show happen in the way it looked, in all the restrictions that were on all these things, and just the kind of like, we're going to figure this out together, and all that kind of attitude that, you know, shows are a challenge, right? All that kind of went to the wayside because we got to do our work for, you know, this little short window of 3 weeks in October of 2020. So that's going to be one that's going to stick with me for a while too, of like, again, the people, the community of it. Yeah, so those are probably like my top 3. And then you have your other ones for all different reasons, right? It's hard to pick one because you do this for so long, right? There's a bunch of different reasons why different ones are your favorites, you know. But yeah, those are probably ones that stick with me the most.
Awesome. All right. I think that gets all of the questions that we had submitted. So thank you for all your thoughtful answers. Chris, do you want to wrap things up for us?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to first and foremost thank all of you for sharing your stories today. And you know, I've taken a lot away from this myself, and I do want to ask you each if there's any, you know, 15-20 second kind of parting thoughts or sound bites, like, you know, be on time, bring a wrench kind of thing. I will say that one of my big takeaways in listening today was kind of a reflection back on my own career very early on, and I didn't do the advice that you all provided today to ask those questions, right? Because I felt like it was maybe a sign of weakness or something like that. And so if I didn't know what was going on, I'd go off in a corner and find a book somewhere and figure it out on my own, which of course takes longer and it's more work, and that's what we said, right? So there's a way to shortcut that, but that's about then providing opportunities for people to find mentors that they can feel comfortable to ask those questions. And the onus is on all of us to turn the tables and find people and ask them, you know, this is new to you. Do you have any questions? And give them that opportunity to feel comfortable to do that. So let's just go around Robin here quickly. Toy, parting thoughts or suggestions?
I would say if you have a question, email me. You can always email me. I will always talk to you. I will always go out for coffee. I will always respond and be that person. So if you need me, reach out.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
I would say 2 things. It's okay to have emotions, right? In this industry, there's going to be a lot of like, because you're also a woman, you're going to be like, okay, I have to keep this in lock. It's okay. You're going to cry. I've cried a bunch. I tell people it's coming out of my eyeballs. Ignore this. I'm fine. So it's okay to have emotions, and don't beat yourself up because of those emotions, and fail a lot, fail often, fail, and you're going to be okay. It's all going to be okay.
Thank you. Nancy?
Be courageous. Yeah, just insist what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. And Vicky?
In addition to all of the other little nuggets of advice that you've heard, I would say also be honest. So if you don't know, I would ask. Or if you messed up and you programmed something wrong, put your hands up straight away and say, that was me, I'm going to fix that right now. because then that's the easiest fix in the world, is if you just made a mistake, and everyone always appreciates that honesty. And also be honest if you're struggling. You can say, and I will always say this, to my designer or my company manager, I've got this little problem. I think it's okay at the moment, but I'm just letting you know now, and just communicating those things in a way that's, before it's a big issue, just let people know what's going on, because then they can help you be open to that help, and back up your show files.
Thank you. All right. Well, one final thank you to all of you for sharing as much as you did today, for taking the time to share all of that with us. And Nancy, it's very, very late in the evening for you. Thank you. Vicki and
Welcome.
Stephanie, you're on the job and taking time for us. So we really do appreciate that. I hope the audience found it as insightful as I did. We are looking forward to perhaps doing more of these panels about women in technology, focusing into a bunch of different industries. So stay tuned for that. If you do have suggestions for what you'd like to see in the future, please drop it in the Q&A section now, or send an email to publicrelations@shure.com. That's at SHURE, public relations, all one word. And there you can also find out more information about future panels like this. So for now, we are signing off, and thanks to everybody.